Hello, Obophiles! This is the second part of my conversation with Olivier Stankiewicz, the principal oboist of the London Symphony Orchestra, who was so generous to spend some time with me. So the first part of the conversation, we talked a lot about, well, his cool oboe and the extra key on it, but also just a lot of advice and things for students, even non-oboe players, that they can use as they navigate through the musical world. And you can find that video by subscribing below. This interview is going to be mostly about his musical journey and the audition experience and some practice techniques that you can incorporate whether or not you play the oboe. So here we go.
So I started playing when I was 6 or 7, I think, or maybe 7 or 8. And I started playing piano first, earlier. I started when I was 4. My mom's a piano teacher, so there was always music at home, and she was always practicing loads, and so I wanted to play the piano like my sister, and but eventually I quickly found out that it was not the instrument for me. I needed something that sort of engaged the body more, that was more physical, and also I think I was struggling with reading the amount of notes. The pianists need to be very good at reading, and that was slowing me down a bit. So I found out that I wanted to play a wind instrument, and then we listened to all the various wind instruments, and I picked the oboe because apparently I said it was the one with the least gap between the notes, the best legato, I think.
Like connected.
I suppose.
That's really telling. Like a lot of. Did you have like a moment where you were like, "Oh, I'm gonna play the oboe," or was it like kind of evolved over time?
No, I think it was. I can't really remember that moment, but I think I just wanted to play the oboe. But we also had a family friend, who played the oboe, and I think it's this is important for kids, right? You wanna be like that guy, like that family friend, and so you pick up the. He's a great oboist, by the way. He was principal in Monte Carlo Philharmonic, and
Cool.
his name is Jean-Paul Barrellon. And anything.
Is there anything quirky about like your transition from the Paris Conservatory into like later education experiences, or just like into the career?
Well, I suppose. Well, actually, for me, the choice of becoming a professional musician was never straightforward.
Hmm.
It's the question actually kept nagging me for years, and whether I was going to whether music was really the thing, or whether I should try to pursue a scientific career. That was always the other possible choice, I would say. And I But I guess that I took my so in the UK it's the A levels in France, baccalaureate. So I suppose for you it's just before university, the exam.
Like the
What is it
SAT
called?
kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, I took my SATs, and there were in what are equivalents in science, with a lot of scientific subjects, and it looked really good. I was admitted to some very good, well, they're not universities, but are kind of prep schools for engineering careers and music. And I had the summer to decide basically where I was going to go. And um, I just remember going to a music festival that summer, uh, and I had some lessons, but I was very impressed with the concerts, the chamber music. It just felt beautiful and warm, and then I also received the reading list for the university, and I looked at it, and I wasn't at all enthused. I just went like, ugh, I have to read I would have to read all this before even before I even start, and we're in early August, and this is for starting in September, and so I kind of that's how it happened, and then I went into music. So
Whoa, that's such a good test. I wish I had thought about that actually. Like the enthusiasm you have for the preparation is very telling.
yeah, I guess it's very. I think choosing a career, or choosing a job, or choosing anything is not so much choosing. I'm quote. Can't remember where I read this, but it's not so much about choosing the advantages. It's mostly choosing the problems you want to deal with, basically. Because that's if you feel that there is a reward in every sector, but are you prepared to face the hard, the difficult parts of a profession or a career? That's actually probably more important, I would say.
Wow.
For example, I love teaching, right? And what are the drawbacks of teaching? Well, for example, for teaching is the admin, is to having to keep track of everyone, is the occasional student you feel that things are not really going the way you'd expect them to go, and so forth. It's writing recommendation letters and so on, and that's the things I don't like to do. But it's a minimal part. I can face that, because at the same time I also get a lot of reward. I also find it generally really fun to spend time with the students. Really fun to meet different students. It keeps my brain flexible to try to explain things, and so that they understand, and try to explain it a different way if they don't, and see also where they're coming from. So for me, for teaching, for example, it's very clear cut. And as a performer, I love being on stage, right? But now, if the drawbacks of the profession of the musicians, a lot of travel and of things, I'm ready to face that too, somehow, and I don't suffer, for example, too much from performance anxiety, which is
Unlucky.
yeah. I mean, I'm lucky. It varies, right? It varies. It has happened that when you're starting your career, when you're start entering the profession, you experience these things more,
Yeah.
and afterwards it settles. But so that's a good, yeah. That's how I see these choices, I would say.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your admission process? When we spoke before, you told me that you felt extremely lucky to be able to study the oboe where you did.
The admission process, what do you mean, if doing the studies, or in
You
orchestras?
didn't know that you were gonna go to the Paris Conservatoire until pretty close to when you started. Is that right? Or
Oh yeah, no, that's funny. I was admitted on a waiting list.
yeah.
I got that year they had very few places, because the Paris Conservatoire has got this ridiculously low admission numbers. They admit maybe one, two, or three oboists a year in undergrad, maximum. I would say I've seen four people being admitted one year, but that's really rare. And in masters, they sometimes admit one student, and so when the year I was admitted, at first they just admitted one person, one friend of mine, and I was on the reserve list. I was on the waiting list, and so yeah, that was some pretty anxious few months before I got the result. But the funny thing is that when I knew I was admitted, basically the next day I was there, doing the inscription, and the day after I met my new professor. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So
Did
that
you
was
know
fun.
who you were gonna study with already before being admitted?
Yeah. They told me I started. So I was admitted to the class of David Walter.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I've never heard it actually pronounced. I always just read it. They're Walters. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
David Walter. No,
Yeah.
it's actually David Walter.
They're Walter.
He's very French. He speaks many languages though.
Oh, I didn't know
His
that.
English
Okay.
is pristine, but
And what was it like studying with him? He's incredibly famous for his
yeah,
teaching.
no, it's fantastic. He's great. He's really freeing. He is so the two professors at in Paris still are Jacques Tisse and David Walter, and they're very different. But I think they're very complementary. Um, they complete each other very well. So David Walter is he does a lot of transcriptions of works. He's a very active chamber musician, and he's very interested in a lot of different repertoire. So he's very open-minded and very sort of liberating musically. So um, they sort of very pragmatic technical approach, and a lot of focus on the on music and style, and also he's got he likes to think analytically about the music a bit, and this is something that I am very interested in. I was always very interested in. So on that front, we get along very well, and no, that was great. And Jacques Tisse, I also studied with Jacques Tisse. Really, I studied with both actually, and Jacques Tisse is quite is different. He I would say he's also open-minded in a musical sense. It's more like he lets you do whatever you want musically. Um, so he leaves you free in that respect. But he has got an incredibly subtle and demanding approach of tone and sound production in general, and actually that connects with the body as a whole, right? And I would say that that's also a way of connecting music making with how it sits in the body, which is also interesting. Also interesting. And Jacques Tisse really is very very demanding as a teacher, and I owe him as much as David Bay. Really, is 50-50, I would say.
Yeah. So once you are in school, the next big issue is how to get the work done. How are you going to practice efficiently and effectively to develop your skills as a performer and musician?
No, I got a sense of that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your like approach to practicing, and maybe how it has evolved, but also like maybe some ideas that have persisted throughout your approach to just practicing with such limited time that you have now, and how to make it most efficient.
I think as a professional, practice is an internal issue. It's because if you're playing 3 concerts a week, then and the rest of the week is occupied with rehearsals and teaching and so forth, then the question of where do you fit the practice in is always it's always a headache. Um, there's no recipe basically, because every week is different. So wherever it fits, wherever you can. And of course, it's also a matter of priorities. I would say at least for me, I know that my priority is always to know to know the music, in the sense that if I have a rehearsal or something, even if it's short notice, I try to always listen to the piece with the music, even if I don't get to actually practice, to spend some time with the music and understanding how it works. Then then there might only be one little bit that I really need to practice, and I can maybe fit that in before the rehearsal or something. But it's true that especially with the kind of lives that we have in the London music scene, you've got to be quick, and you become quick. Actually, it's something that you acquire as well. But then, of course, whenever you have something more demanding to play, like a recital with new repertoire that you don't know, or recording or something, then of course it's important to maintain to practice for that goal.
So I think it'd be helpful to divide your practice into parts. For me, the first thing I like to do in the morning is just spend some time on fundamentals, warming up, playing scales, that kind of thing. And then later in the day, I might do another session where I'm learning music or just hashing out some technique things. Olivier had some advice that helped me think about this divide and conquer technique with a little bit different perspective.
Personally, I think I just need to be honest about this. I never had a routine because it's not in my nature. I think probably it would be very good for me if I had a routine. I'd love to have a routine. I just haven't figured out how, and I don't know if it's gonna happen anytime soon. But I know that even as a student, I was very curiosity driven. So the thing is that I need to be interested in what I'm doing, and if I'm interested in what I'm doing, I can work very hard, and I can work for spend a lot of hours figuring out even something that would. It doesn't matter if it's interesting for someone else or me, but as long as the moment I get really interested and the moment I get really hooked onto something, then that's when it starts to work. Until I reach this point, it's very difficult for me to actually work hard enough on something. And so the answer for me is often, how can I make it interesting? Rather than how can I practice 5 hours? I know that the moment I'm interested, I won't be counting the hours. So how can I make it interesting? How can I make it interesting is, for example, analyzing music clearly. That's generally the step that gets me interested in what I'm doing, is that if I start to look at the music and look at how it's written, how it's built, what are the thoughts behind it, then I start to enter the subject, and then it becomes easier to practice. If often to make it interesting means also maybe to make it difficult, and that's also something that is a very good practice tip, is that if you find yourself bored and or unable to focus or something, it might be that what you're trying to do is not challenging enough. So to raise the challenge, for example, very simple example is, for example, if you ever tried to practice the Mozart oboe concerto with the metronome offbeat, then for some people this will be very difficult. For some people this will be easy. Well, then in that case, put it on the 4th 16th note of the beat. And if that is too easy, put the metronome on the 2nd 16th note of every beat. I can guarantee you that is really hard to play against a metronome that is shifted by just 1 16th note. And if that's difficult, then you will find it easier. Is that challenge will make it easier for you to focus. You will spend time more easy, because it becomes like a game as well, right?
Yeah, no, I love that advice. One of my biggest struggles is practicing pitch consistency and consistently, right? I have a hard time. Like, I know it's one of my big issues, but I'll be pretty good for a few weeks just like doing drone work and scales and things like this, but I have a really hard time incorporating that into like repertoire. Do you have any advice for engaging the mind?
Well, of course, if you can play it with someone, if you can play with another instrument, then of course that helps. For me, the question of pitch is very related to the question of the body. Is very related to the question of tone production in general. And so it's I try to always find my own physical balance so that what I play comes out at pitch somehow. If I'm sitting well in the air, and that is something that I find engaging. Is for example, yeah, I always try to practice. Sometimes I practice standing on one leg, or with the front of my feet resting against something to shift my center of gravity, or something. And I find that interesting. And since I'm starting, and since it is interesting from a tone production point of view, then it also becomes interesting from a pitch point of view, I would say.
So priorities are super important. Sometimes, though, we just need a little bit of guidance on how to actually shed passage and just work on actual music, the nitty gritty. And Olivier showed me a practice technique for this Bach that I was working on, which I absolutely loved, and I'm trying to work into the rest of my practice.
Exactly. So, sorry?
Make a skeleton.
Yeah, exactly. Make a skeleton. That's a great way of explaining it. Can you try it and do it from the beginning, maybe?
Take as much out as possible, or
as much as is comfortable, right? It doesn't matter exactly if you play the right notes or not. We want to feel the rhythm and the harmony, basically. Great, that was great. Great choice of notes, and it comes to you naturally, so you can really practice in this way. Can you play this?
maybe vary the note length a little bit to give us this idea of this bar structure a bit. Okay, so that's very interesting. Are you sure you want to give us so much of the third beat of every bar?
Maybe the first beat more.
I think that with Baroque music we need to go to the fundamentals, right? Of giving us a reference frame, right? This first phrase is quite intricate, right? Of course, the G is gonna be a big landing point. Dum bum bum bim bum da-da-dum bim 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 ba. So the bar structure won't be that strong in the beginning. That's why I also think of it as a hemiola, right? But if you've had something that is not that rigid, then afterwards we need the reference, right? If you want to make something interesting, you need to make something boring first, right? Interesting all the time is boring as a whole, right? So I'm not saying that it's boring to play. I find it very satisfying personally, but it's just a reference frame, yeah. One more time. Yes, good. Can you now give us the same thing, but the important on the first beat a little bit longer, because it's kind of all on the first note. It's ya pum 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 pe. Do it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, good, good. And now. Or something else. Okay, good. But now we've lost a little bit of the bar structure. So let's try and see if we can find it back. You sound fuller as well, and you move in a more organic way this way, right? So this is not for the concert, but for the practice. You're allowed to swap every 7 minutes. Yeah. One more time. Yes. You need to do it many times until it becomes organic. Until it feels easy somehow. Wanna try one more time? Yeah. Oh, you see? I'm hearing tirata tito.
Oh.
Yabba papa. Yabba dabba. Deri deri. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit intellectual. You need to feel it. Yes. And now adding all the notes. Yeah? How did it feel?
It's a little scary, but
A little bit scary, yeah?
it's more like music-y. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, I know you kind of already told me in our like non-recorded conversations about your experience auditioning and finally culminating with your current position in the London Symphony. I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit about like the lessons you learned along the way and how that helped you in the ultimate audition.
So I haven't done that many auditions in my life, I must be honest. I did a couple unsuccessful ones for youth orchestras in when I was at the Conservatoire. I did an unsuccessful one for the Deutsche Deutsche Symphonieorchester. They had a principal oboe position, but it was not the actual audition. It was like a pre-audition for younger musicians. That was unsuccessful. I applied for a second oboe position in the French radio. That was unsuccessful. Then I got my first job as principal oboe in Toulouse, and then I applied for the London Symphony Orchestra. So in total, I've done actually 4 auditions in my life, 2 of which were successful. So if my advice is worth anything, then I'd say the advice of someone who's done 15 auditions and succeeded in the end might be more valuable. But what I can say is, first of all, don't listen to what people are always talking way too much before auditions. They're always wild theories, or who are they going to appoint, or who are they going to looking for, this or that. Try to just close your ear to this, because people have no idea what they're talking about on the outside, and especially what's happening inside orchestras or complex dynamics. Orchestras are big organizations with over 100 of musicians, right? Sometimes some people believe they have some insider information. They will have information that they would have heard from one person or from 2 persons, right? Which might represent an absolute minority in, say, a woodwind section or an orchestra, and that gets deformed and all of that. So your best bet is really to try and not adjust, I think, to what you believe is the situation in an orchestra, what you think they are looking for, if you believe you've got a chance or not. I would say just close your ears and just focus on your playing. Try to play as best as you can with your standards. That's also something that I believe in, is that you want to be recruited for what you stand for, right? And so also you are going to play the best, I believe, if you're true to yourself in the playing, right? If you try to sound like someone else, you're likely not going to sound very well, and that is something that you can really tell, I think, listening to musicians, who is being an authentic musician, who's being a genuine musician, and you can quickly sense when something is not genuine. And this is something that is really, for me, the number one quality of a musician. That being said, some musical choices might be a little bit unconventional, I would say, and it is for you to decide, right? So you're auditioning for a position. Say they ask for a cadenza, typically. You have a crazy out there cadenza. Are you going to play just that cadenza in the audition? Well, probably, if it's an audition, you can probably play a great cadenza, which is not a crazy out there cadenza. If it's an audition, you can play your crazy out there cadenza in a concert, right? Ultimately, you want to play concerts, not auditions, right? Unless you believe it's an orchestra that will really value that, then that I would say is a little bit of a counterpoint to what I just said, is that on such specific choices, or the question, okay, maybe that might sound a bit strange to some ears, but the question of ornamenting, say in a Mozart concerto, I was quite happy to hear many candidates ornament. We had auditions for a clarinet position in London, about 3 years ago, and I was quite happy to hear many candidates ornament. But in any case, this won't be a deciding factor for anyone. You're never gonna appoint someone or forward someone in an audition because they ornament, right? You judge musical qualities as a whole. You judge musicianship and technical proficiency and all of this, and ornamentation is a part of that, right? If you want to be safe, if you're someone who tends to ornament, if you're a good musician, you probably know that unless you're playing, say, a Baroque concerto that has got the bare structure and when everything relies on ornamentation, then you know that a good delivery of that piece doesn't rely on ornamentation to such an extent.
So that's some riveting tales from London Symphony Orchestra's principal oboist. Please don't forget to subscribe below for more Obophiles nonsense. And of course, as always, when in doubt, play beautifully.